Alright guys, so today we're going to be creating a cool flyer design for a garage and repair shop called Roberto's. So the first thing I want to do here is set up my Photoshop file, just with the name and everything like that, so that it'll be easy for us to save. Alright, and you can always do this later, but I'm just going to set this up for now, like so. And let's go ahead and change this to inches and make the width about 8.5 by 11. Okay, and you can leave the resolution set to 300. RGB color is fine, and background contents can stay as is, set to black, and then go ahead and hit create. The first thing I'm going to do is double click the background layer here to unlock it. Let's just go ahead and call this background. We can now bring in our first texture. I'm going to start off by using Paper Texture 19 from Greta Ivy here in the freebies, and I'm just going to open this up really quick and drag it into my Photoshop document. Now I'm just using Command and the tilde to come over here and Command W to close that tab. Go ahead and double click on this layer and call it Paper Texture 19. Hold down the Control key to click on the layer and convert it to a smart object. And that's just going to make it so that we can resize it without any loss in quality. Okay, so press Command T to do a free transform, and then just hold down Alt Option and the Shift key and drag inwards from any of the four corners to scale it down from the center. Okay, and you may want to come up just a little bit more, about there, looking good. And then let's come back to our Finder here and grab the other paper texture 2, from the same pack. Alright, we're going to drop this on top of our first texture, convert this to a smart object as well. And this one we will just give a name Paper Texture 2, just to keep things nice and organized. Alright, but this time I'm going to change the blending mode of the paper to multiply, and then I'm just going to scale this down a bit as well. Alright, so that it fits nicely within our document window here. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is come down here to the adjustment layer icon, add a black and white adjustment layer, and change the blending mode to overlay. Now what this is going to do is enhance the contrast. It's going to give us a little bit of a boost here, and you can kind of see what that looks like. But we're not finished. We're going to come back down to the adjustment layer icon, and this time we're going to choose curves. We're going to place a point right here around the middle of the grid or so. And you'll notice just below that we have an input and an output. So let's enter these values manually. For the input, I'm going to put in a value of about 147. And for the output, I'll set it to about 100. So it creates this nice kind of downward curve. And you can see that that's giving us a little bit of a darker result here. Okay, so once you've done that, click on the curves layer. Come back down to the adjustment layer icon one more time, and this time add a normal black and white adjustment layer, so everything is black and white below this layer. What you want to do from here is press Command, Alt Option, Shift, and E on the keyboard. And what that's going to do is merge everything below that layer that you have selected. So I'm just going to double click on this layer, call it Merged Layers Inverted, because as you may have guessed, we are now going to invert this layer, which you can do just by pressing Command and I on the keyboard. Now another way that you could do this is by coming up to Image, Adjustments, Invert. So either that or the keyboard shortcut is fine. Now once you've merged those layers, we're actually going to add another adjustment layer. So come back down and this time add a levels adjustment. And let's go ahead and move the left slider in so that it's set to around 60, 69, or 70. Somewhere about there. And then let's move the right slider in towards the left until it's about 210 or so, something like that. Okay, so we're getting even more contrast, and we're going to do that by once again placing another curves adjustment layer on top. This time we'll go ahead and create another point in the middle of the grid here, right in the center. And this time for the values, let's go ahead and enter 162 for the input, and the output can be at about 95. Okay, so now we've created this nice dark texture here. So the next thing we're going to do is make sure that we have our top curves adjustment layer selected and use that same keyboard shortcut that we used before. Command, Alt Option, Shift, and the letter E on the keyboard, and that's going to merge everything all together. So double click in here once again, and let's just go ahead and call this Merge 2. Now I'm going to press Command and T on the keyboard to do a free transform. Hold down the Control key and click on the background, and now I'll flip it horizontally, and then hold down Control and click once again and flip it vertically. Okay, so we've basically flipped this texture upside down. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit, hold down Alt, Option, and Shift, and then just scale this texture up. Alright, so I'm just dragging outwards from the lower right-hand corner here to scale this up to about there, and then go ahead and press Enter to apply the changes, and Command and 0 to fit your texture back into your window. So at this point, we've got our background pretty much set up. But there is one more thing that I want to add to this just to give it a little bit more of a grungy feel. I'm going to come over here into the District 62 folder and grab the 4.png file from the 40 awesome PNG textures. And we're going to drag this into our document. So I'm just going to click and drag. And if it doesn't let you click and drag, another kind of workaround that you can do is press Command A to select all, Command C to copy it, Command D to deselect, and then you can close it. And then back here in your working document, press Command V to paste. Now, once again, hold down the Control key and click on the layer to convert it to a smart object. And then I'm just going to double click on the layer name once that's done and just call it 4PNG. Now zoom out by pressing Command and the minus key, press Command T to do a free transform, and then let's scale this down by holding Shift, Alt, and Option on the keyboard. Now I just need to move this over so I can see it, and I'm going to hold down the Shift key and move my cursor over the top right corner, and you'll see that my cursor changes into this kind of arc here. So hold down the Shift key and just rotate this so that it's upright, and it kind of matches the orientation of your document. Okay, and it doesn't have to fit perfectly in there, maybe somewhere about there, and then go ahead and press Return or Enter on the keyboard to apply the changes. And from here I'm going to press the number 4 to lower the opacity to 40%. Now any of the numbers on your keyboard will basically change your layer to the opacity by increments of 10. So if you press 5, it's 50%, 7 is 70%, and so forth. Now one last thing we want to do here is double click on the 4.png layer, and I'm going to check off the color overlay option and change the color here from black to white, and then hit OK. Hit OK once again, and we now have a white texture set to 40% on top of our merged texture layer. I'm going to select the 4.png layer, hold down the Shift key and click on the background layer, and then I'm going to click on this little folder icon down here at the bottom. And what that's going to do is put all of those layers into a nice, neat group folder for us that I can just rename background. What we want to do now is create another new layer, press the letter U on the keyboard to get our shape tool. Now make sure that you have this circle shape selected here, or the ellipse. Okay, and if you don't, you can hold down the Shift key and tap U until you get it, just to kind of scroll through the other options for that tool. Now one thing that you want to make sure is that you don't have any fill color here, so check this white box with the red stroke, and then you can just leave a solid stroke color and about a 1 pixel outline. Alright, then what I'm going to do is hold down the Shift key and just click and drag to create a circle. Something about there looks good. Okay, and then let go. And you'll see that we now have this ellipse 1 layer. So the next thing we're going to do is press T on the keyboard to get our type tool, and as I hover my cursor over this path here, or over this stroke, you'll see that it kind of changes. So if I click now, I will be able to type along this path. So what I'm going to do is hold down the Shift key and type the letter I a few times so that I have these uppercase I's. Okay, and I'm going to press Command A to select all of these. And then over here, I just want to make sure that I have my default colors, and I want to use a solid white. Okay, and I'm also going to change this to a different typeface. I'm just going to go with a regular myriad. Should be fine. Okay, and now you can see these eyes actually showing up. So I'm going to select all of those just by clicking and dragging to highlight them. Press Command C, then tap my right arrow, and press Command V a few times to paste copies. Alright, press Command A again to select all, and then hold down the Alt Option key and tap the right arrow to space these out apart from each other. And that's going to help fill in the shape here. Alright, so it gives us a little bit of room in between each of these characters. Okay, and if you need to, you can kind of rotate it. Just make sure that you have at least one of these basically in the center. Alright, so from here what I'm going to do is double click on the layer and once again check off the color overlay option. Click in it here and let's just go ahead and change the value to FFF6B7, which is this nice kind of off-white cream color, and then go ahead and hit OK. Now select the layer and press Command J to make a copy. Double click it once again, and we want to leave the color overlay as is, but we're actually going to check off a stroke option. Alright, make sure that the stroke is set to about 8 pixels, 8 or 9 is fine. Position outside, make sure the opacity is all the way up, and then we're going to use the same color that we just used, so FFF 6B7. Okay, and that's basically just creating a thicker, bolder line. What we want to do from here is actually kind of hide these, so I'm going to hold down the Alt Option key and click on the Layer Mask option down here at the bottom of the Layers palette. Now what that's going to do is basically hide everything, so you can no longer see the copy with the bold stroke applied to it. But if I press B to get my brush tool and make sure that I have a solid white fill selected, I can basically now come in here and let me just make my brush a little bit smaller by using the left bracket key, and I can just brush over this to reveal the heavier stroke. So I want to do that in the center here, then I'm just going to drag a guide down somewhere around here and do the same thing for one of these lines on the left side and one of these lines on the right. And the reason I'm using the guide is just to make sure that it's basically symmetrical. Alright, so I can now hide that. You should now have 1, 2, 3 bold lines showing up. So go ahead and create another new layer, grab your type tool, and then if you click in here, you'll see that you might accidentally select one of these ellipses. So if that's the case, you can just basically click somewhere that's further apart from that shape, like down here in the corner. Okay, so I'm now just going to add the number 60 and then double click to select it. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is come up here and we're going to change the typeface. So instead of using Myriad here, I'm actually going to change this to a font from the full bundle called Letterpress Clean Wood. And then I'm going to move this up here so that it's just below this first bold stroke. Now double click on the layer, check off color overlay, and this time let's go ahead and change the color of this to BB3636, which is kind of a pale red color. Alright, go ahead and hit OK. And then I'm actually going to move my cursor and click just in between the two numbers here. Hold down the Alt Option key and tap my left arrow maybe 2 times. And that's just going to decrease the space in between the two letters so that I can manually adjust the kerning. Now I'll press Command J to duplicate this layer. Hold down the Shift key and just drag it over here so that it's on the opposite side. And then let's change this value to about 120. I'm going to do the same thing because there's a little too much space in between each of these letters. So, these kind of details really help if you go in and adjust the kerning because, sometimes when you're using fonts, the spacing can be a little bit weird. So it always pays off to go that extra little step just to fix that. Make another copy and move the third number up here. And let's just change this value to 80. And again, move the cursor in between the two numbers, hold down the Alt Option key and tap the left arrow a few times. So at this point we've basically set up what is going to serve as our speedometer. And I'm going to select my top number layer here, hold down the Shift key and select the ellipse. And this time instead of clicking the folder icon, we can just press Command G to put this into a group folder. And then let's just go ahead and rename this speedometer. Alright guys, so the next thing we're going to do is come back to our folder and open the transportation image from Graphic Goods, Transportation 3, and we've got this awesome car illustration here from the bundle. So I'm just going to move this tab to the side, click and drag the car into my document, press Command and the tilde, then Command and W to toggle over to it and close it. Hold down the Control key and click on the layer to convert it to a smart object. And then let's just go ahead and change the name to transportation3.png just so it's nice and easy to find. Now I'll press Command and T on the keyboard, hold down Alt, Option, and Shift, and drag outwards from any of the 4 corners of the bounding box to scale this up. Now the idea here is that I want it to kind of overlap some of these tan eyes here in the background, part of our speedometer. And before I commit to this change, I'm actually going to hold down the Control key, click on it, and choose Flip Horizontal so that our car is facing the other way. Alright, and I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger, and then move it over a couple of clicks so it's somewhere about there, and then press Return on the keyboard to apply the changes. Double click on the layer to bring up my layer styles, check off the color overlay box, and we're going to use the same red that we used for the numbers, so it should automatically remember this value from before, but if not, we are using the color BB3636 as shown here. Alright, so that's our hex value. Go ahead and hit OK to apply the changes, and the next thing we want to do is basically make it so you don't see these tick marks here behind the car. And the way that we can do that is by clicking on the Smart Object thumbnail while holding the Command key. And you'll see that after I do that, it now has activated a selection around the entire car. So while the selection is active, go ahead and click on the new layer icon at the bottom of the layer palette. Come up here to the Select menu, and then choose Modify, Expand, and set a value of about 20 pixels and hit OK. And now make sure that you have white set as your foreground color, and then press Alt, Option, and Delete on the keyboard. Now that's going to fill your selection with your foreground color. The next thing we want to do is press Command D to deselect, or you could come up to the Select menu and choose Deselect from here. I'm going to now grab my brush by pressing B on the keyboard and just fill in some of these gaps here, some of these small tiny areas of detail that we want to fill in. Okay, you don't have to be super meticulous about this, but just do kind of a quick job just to clean it up a little bit. And now what I can do is hold down the Command key and click on the thumbnail for this layer to activate a selection around it, poke out the eyeball to turn off the visibility, and now I'm going to select the speedometer group folder, press Command-Shift-I to invert the selection, and then I'm going to click on the layer mask icon at the bottom of the layers palette. Okay, and now you can see that it's basically given us a little bit of a border between the car and these tick marks here. What I can now do is grab my regular brush tool, press X to switch to black, and I can paint out some of these other lines here on the bottom. Okay, because I don't want these lines to be coming all the way to the bottom. This is where some of our text is going to go. And if you need to make sure that it's symmetrical, just go ahead and drag down another guide from the top. And if you guys don't see those guides, you can just access your rulers by coming up to View and choosing Rulers from here, or by pressing Command and R on the keyboard. Okay, so something like that is looking pretty good, and we've now given ourselves a little bit of space here on the bottom to add our text. Okay, but before we move on, I'm just going to select my Transportation 3 layer, and I can actually delete this layer above it now, this white layer. We don't need that anymore. And then press Command-G to put it into a folder, and I'll just call this group folder Car. The next thing we're going to do is come back into the District 62 folder, the Hanley Rough Font Collection, and we're going to open this free file called logos page1.ai. I'm just going to open this up in Illustrator really quick, and there's a couple of really cool looking logos here that are made from this awesome asset found in the bundle. But for now, the only one that I need is this frame. So I'm just going to click on the frame here, and then all I'm going to do is press Command X to cut it, and then I can basically close out. I don't want to save it. I'm going to pop back over to Photoshop here and press Command V to paste it, and make sure that you paste as Smart Object. We don't want to paste it as pixels, and then hit OK. Now the first thing I'm going to do is hold down the Shift key and move my cursor over the corner so that I can rotate this frame. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit by pressing Command and the minus key, and then once again scale it up from the center by holding Alt, Option, and Shift. And just leave yourself a little bit of room on the top and the bottom. Then click and hold the Shift key and just slide it over to the right here. Now I can press Enter or Return to apply the changes. And I'm just going to rename this layer Frame and double click on it to bring up my layer styles. Check off the color overlay option, and instead of using this red, we're going to go back to our off-white color, which was FFF6B7. Hit OK. And now what we want to do is basically, we want this frame to extend all the way over here to the left. So how can we do that? Because it looks like it's a little bit short. Well, the way that we're going to do this is by grabbing our Marquee tool, pressing M on the keyboard, and then I'm just going to click and drag around the frame a little bit past the center point here. Okay, so we have this selection on the right side, and I'm going to click on the layer mask on the bottom, so you basically have this kind of open-ended frame here. Now I can duplicate the layer by pressing Command J, press V to get my selection tool, and then Command T to do a free transform. Now just like before, hold down the Control key and click on the frame and choose Flip Horizontal. Now I can hold the Shift key and just kind of drag this over to the left side and press Return to apply the changes. And if you need to, you can use the arrow to kind of get it in place so that you have the same amount of space on all sides. Okay, and then from there, select both copies while holding the Shift key, press Command G to put it into a folder, and call it Frame. Now, as you can see, it's a little bit tight here. The car is kind of overlapping the frame and everything like that. So we're actually going to select the car and the speedometer layers together, both of those folders, and then press Command T to do a free transform, and then hold down the Alt, Option, and Shift keys and just drag inwards a little bit just to give ourselves some breathing room here. And then press return or enter to apply the changes. Now while you still have both of these folders selected, hold down the shift key and just tap the down arrow a few times to try and center your car and your speedometer visually. Alright, so I'm going to return to my Finder here, go over to the Beacon collection, and open the Ultimate Page Decoration bundle. And here there should be a free EPS file, which I'm just going to open really quickly in Illustrator, and this will allow us to grab our next piece. Now what I want to do here is grab this nice looking ampersand from the bottom, and I'm using the third one in from the left. Now I'm just going to cut this one, Command X, and then close out of this with Command W, and return to Photoshop by pressing Command and Tab until I get over here. Now I'm going to click on the frame folder to make sure that I'm at the top of my layers palette, press Command V and paste this as a smart object. Now I want to make this a little bit bigger, so hold down Alt, Option, and Shift and just drag outwards a little bit. So it's about that size, and then just move it down here. Now it's a little bit hard to see, so we're going to fix that by just first renaming the layer. I'm just putting in an and symbol so I know, and then double clicking on it, applying a color overlay, and this time we're going to go back to our red color, BB3636, and hit OK. Now the next thing I'm going to do is add some more text, so create a new layer, press T on the keyboard to get your type tool, and then click in here. Now I'm going to use a capital G and a lowercase ARAGE, press Command A to select all, and then up here you can either change the font here or you can use your character panel by going to Window, Character, and you can change your font here as well. So this time I'm going to go back to Handley and I'm going to use Handley Script. Alright, which is a really nice looking script font, also part of the free bundle that you guys will get when you purchase this awesome collection of elements. Alright, so I'm going to double click to select all of this and highlight my text, and what I want to do is click on my fill color here, so you can select it either here or on the top. And now I'm just going to sample some of this cream color, FFF6B7, and hit OK. And then let's zoom in for a second, because I just want to show you guys as we adjust the kerning between our letters here. Alright, so I'm going to click my cursor in between these two letters, the G and the A, hold down Alt Option and tap the left arrow a few times, and then do the same for some of these other letters. Now you should only have to press the left arrow maybe 3 or 4 times just to make it look like the text is connected. Alright, so it should look something like that. And now you can kind of place it in here, and it looks like I just need to clean this up really quick. And then I'm going to press Command J to make a copy of the text, hold down Shift and slide it over here to the right of the ampersand, and then double click inside, and this time we're going to type the word repairs. Alright, and just like before, let's go in between each of these letters and just adjust them so that they look like they're connected. Okay, and then here I'm just going to decrease the space a little bit to about there. And now I'm going to click on my Move tool, zoom out a little bit, and I'm just going to adjust the spacing here between each of these so that they look nice and even. Okay, and then I'll select the top copy here, Repairs, hold down the Shift key and select the ampersand, press Command G on the keyboard, and now I'm just going to rename this group folder, Garage and Repairs. Painfully obvious, but it makes it really easy when you need to find something in a pinch. My naming conventions are not the most unique, but they do help in a pinch. Alright, and now that I can move this up a little bit, I'm actually going to get rid of maybe 1 or 2 more of these lines here, just to give myself a little more room for the text. Alright, so I'm just using my brush tool to come in there and paint with black to hide those lines. And now I can tap it up a few times so that it fits nicely in that space. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and create another new layer, grab my text tool once again, and click down here on the bottom. And now we're going to type out our address, which is going to be 1280 Riverside Drive, comma, Brooklyn, comma, NY, 10033, and then press Command A to select all. And let's just go ahead and change the size. So you can change the size here by clicking and dragging, or you can manually input a value. So I'm going to change the size to around 27 for now, and then let's change the font from Handley Script to Slim Serif. Okay, and then we can just kind of move this over here and center it just about below our Garage and Repairs text. Alright, and if you want to, you can click inside of this make it a little bit smaller by using the keyboard shortcut Command Shift and the left caret. And that's just going to reduce the size, or you can use the right caret to increase the size, depending on what you guys like and what you think looks good. Okay, so now with that layer selected, press Command G to add it to a group folder, and I'm just going to call it Address. Okay, so now we're starting to add some copy here, we're getting some details in here, and it's looking pretty good. So we're going to add a few more of these details now. I'm going to come back to my Finder, and I'm going to come into District 62, Hanley Rough Font Collection, and this time let's go ahead and grab our extras, extras1.eps, and just pop that open in Illustrator. And what I want to do is grab this ESTD right here. It's the one that has a little bit of a slab on it and it's got a rough texture on top. And I'm just going to cut it, close it, pop back over to Photoshop, and then paste this in as a smart object. And now I'll bring this down here while holding the Shift key, press Return to apply the changes, and I'll just rename this layer ESTD before double clicking on it to bring up my layer styles. Check off Color Overlay, and then let's just go back to our cream color and hit OK. Now we want to try and kind of match this with our font because this is a nice vector lock up here, but we want to now include a year. So create a new layer, grab your text tool again, and click, and then let's just enter 1967. Press Command A to select all, and then we're going to use Hanley Rough Slim Serif. Okay, and I think over here I actually needed to use the rough version as well, so I'm going to change that back to Hanley Rough Slim Serif. There you go. I was accidentally using a clean version, so I'm just going to change that up to make sure I'm using the right font in both instances, and I'm going to slide it over here so that I can try to line this up. So I'll once again use my rulers to drag a guide down to the top of the ESTD as well as the bottom, and now I can match my letters up so that they are the same height. About there looks good. Maybe make it a little bit larger on the top, and I'm just doing a free transform, Command T, and scaling that up while holding the Option key. And now again, move your cursor in between the numbers and use Alt Option and the left arrow to decrease the spacing. Okay, something like that looks good. And then I'm going to press Command and the semicolon to turn my rulers off, to turn off my guides. All right, and tap it over a few times. And we're looking pretty good, guys. So let's now add a few more details here to the bottom. Come back to your Finder, and this time I'm going to grab the extra textures from that same Hanley Rough Font Collection folder. Come over here, and I'm going to grab these cool looking grungy stars, cut them, close out, come into Photoshop and paste them as a smart object. And now I'm going to hold Alt Option and Shift and just scale them down, hold the Shift key and drag them down here so they overlap our ESTD 1967. And what I'm going to do now is crop these or mask them so that I only have these three on the left. So press M to get your rectangular marquee tool, click and drag around the first three stars, and then select your layer mask. Now you should only see these first three. Okay, so I'm going to rename this Stars, double click on the layer to bring up your layer styles, check off Color Overlay, click in this color box here, and instead of manually typing in the value, we can simply use this eyedropper to grab that red from the car or anywhere else where we're using that same color. Then just go ahead and hit OK. And now what you can do is press Command T if you want to make them a little bit smaller. That's perfectly fine. Okay, and just hold the Shift key to tap them over a few times. And now press Command J to make a duplicate of that layer, Command T, and then hold the Shift key and drag these over onto the right so that we've got three stars on both sides. Now I'm just zooming out to fit everything onto my screen, and we're looking pretty good. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select my top layer, which is the stars copy, and then while holding Shift, select the ESTD layer here and press Command G to put it into a group folder, and I'm just going to rename this folder Extras. Now, I'm a little bit crazy when it comes to folders. I like them to kind of be in the order that they are in the document. So, we've got our garage and repairs, followed by our address, and then the extras, just so that, it's a little bit easier to find these things. So, the order of these things is totally up to you because there's not a lot of things overlapping, but that's just the way that I like to do it. So before moving on, I'm just going to check everything, maybe space these out a little bit, holding the Shift key and just tapping down each of these folders to once again give ourselves a little bit of breathing room there. Okay, now I'm going to select my frame folder, create a new layer, and switch back to my type tool, and now I'm going to type out the word, or the name, Roberto's. And now I'm just going to select my text by pressing Command A, and let's go ahead and change this to Hanley Rough Block Inline. Now with my text selected here, I can press Command T and just scale this up so it's nice and large. Grab my text tool again and then click inside. And now what I want to do is come up here to the top toolbar and choose the Create Warped Text icon, which looks like a T with a little bit of an arc underline underneath it. Click on that, and that will bring up your Warp Text dialog box. Now for the style, click here and choose Arc. Now you have the option to bend it either horizontally or vertically. We're going to stick with horizontal and just change the value to around 48 or so because we want it to match the curve of the speedometer. Now I'm going to move this down by clicking and dragging while holding the Shift key and basically just trying to kind of center this now. So press Command T to do a free transform and then hold Alt Option and Shift and scale it down a little bit by dragging inwards from any of the four corners of the bounding box. And I'm basically just going to add a little bit of space here, moving the name closer to the top. And then you can also come in here and adjust the kerning by holding the Alt Option key and tapping the left arrow. And now that's going to adjust the spacing between the entire name at the same time, as opposed to before where we were doing individual characters like that. Okay, so what I want to do next is press Command J to make a copy, and then Command and the left bracket to move this layer below our top layer. So our top layer is here and our copy is just below. Double click on the copy layer, check off color overlay, and leave it set to this red color. Hit OK. And now hold the Shift key and tap the down arrow maybe 4 or 5 times. Alright, so we have this kind of offset effect here. Now with this layer selected, press Command J once again. Double click to bring up the layer styles, and let's change the color overlay now from red to black. Hit OK. Check off stroke, and now let's apply a stroke of about 9 pixels with a position on the outside, opacity at 100, and change the fill color of this to black as well, and then hit OK to apply the changes. So you've now got 3 copies of your text. You have your pale yellow color on top, this black color with the stroke in the middle, and the red below that. So what we can do now is tap this black copy up a few times so that you're basically just getting the edges of the red copy below. Alright, and you can see as I move this around the effect that it has. It creates this nice kind of offset drop shadow effect. Okay, so once you're happy with that, click on your top copy here, hold Shift and click on the third copy of your text, press Command G to put it into a group folder, and I'm just going to call that TT for title treatment. And now we've basically completed our design. So that wraps up our design tutorial, guys, and we now have this really cool looking garage and repairs shop ad for an old school promotion. So we've used a lot of these great vintage elements from this month's bundle to piece this together. There's a lot of really cool stuff inside, and this is just a small example and a small, piece of some of the stuff that you guys are going to get. So thank you so much for following along. I hope that you guys have found this tutorial to be helpful, and hopefully you enjoy the outcome. And I can't wait to see what you guys do with this pack. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.